What's going on, peeps? It's Wrath here, hanging out today playing some Idle Heroes. I want to thank you guys so much for coming to hang out with me today. If you liked the video, don't forget, smash that thumbs up button to show your support. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe as well. Alright guys, we're here today on the Big Daddy account, the old Pappy account, because it's new event day. We're going to talk about the new events. We'll do a little bit of them, not going to go crazy and do a bunch of stuff. Mainly, today is always talky day. It's what we do. If you don't like that, I is sorry. Before we jump into talking about anything, we've got a new patron on the channel. And today's patron, I was really excited when I read it because it reminded me immediately of Skyrim, which I love. Anyways, today's patron is Jurgen Winter. Now, I'm like 49.6% sure that's right because I even Googled it to make sure that it was Jurgen and I wasn't just like braining it in there. But indeed, according to Google, it's Jurgen. If it's not, I'm sorry. But anyways, it just reminded me of Skyrim, Jurgen Windcaller, but this is Jurgen Winter. Close enough, we're good friends. But thank you very much for supporting the channel. It does mean a lot to me, and I really appreciate that. You help keep things going here, and that's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. So thank you very much. With that said, let's dive in. We're diving into the events. They're not really special, but you know how Wrath always says things that are dumb and wrong? That's just who I am. I've said before that you don't ever really get progress from shelter missions or wishing well events. Well, it would seem that this event week has just determined to prove me wrong, that there's actually a decent amount of stuff in this event. So first up, just the pay to win Garbo that all the free to play players hate on. You get a mim. If you want to buy a mim, you can just straight up buy a mim. That's pretty cool. If you need mim. I'm not going to build him, so it's not really a big deal to me, but that's not bad. That's a pretty solid unit to just pop off, but also, there's a new Valkyrie skin. And I'm not going to lie, I am digging that super much. So much that I almost want to buy it, but I'm not going to because I'm just not going to. I'm going to wait till it hits the relic shop and then waste relics on it. If it ever hopefully it shows up there. But that is just hot. I am totally down with that. Like, that's super duper cool in my book. Loving that deal. Other than that, nothing really special going on in your offers. Just wanted to pop that out there because it was cool. As for the Wishing Well event done, because after, I don't know, a year of running it this way, they still leave the event done part in there. Not sure why. It should just be Wishing Well or Wishing Well event. You don't have to put event done, okay? We understand. But whatever, not a big deal. As always, the rewards are the same as usual. You're going to get 8 super chips, which is not bad, and 8 orbs for completion, which is fantastic. It's 4,000 gems worth of orbs, and what is that, like 2,000 gems worth of super chips? So that's 6,000 gems worth of loot just in the specific rewards, not counting what comes off the wheel when you spin all those spins. But you also nag 5 relics out, which... you nab, whatever, close enough. You get 5 relics, which is hot, but you also get a Kamath. Now, Kamath is a pretty solid unit when it comes to PvP in the Tower of Oblivion. Outside of those 2 areas, he doesn't really do that great. He's not a boss fighter, he's not an Aspen dungeon fighter, but he's a pretty decent unit. You don't see him quite as much in the top anymore because, let's be honest, what does the top become? Ada. It's become Ada and Aspen and GVE, and everybody wrecks those, which I'm actually really happy about. I'm not even going to lie. I'm so glad that Good versus Evil aura is back on top in Arena. That's how it should always have been. It never should have been not the aura that was top in PvP, because it's the hardest thing to build. So I'm glad to see it back. Now, there's mixed emotions out there about old Ada, but, you know, whatever. It will be what it will be. With that said, you don't see as many Kamaths as you once did see, but he's still not a bad unit for the early mid PvP ranges. When you start moving toward the late game, probably not going to run him. You might run a Jara or a Horus instead and get better results, but he's not a terrible unit. However, it is the casino event, and that's probably the easiest one in the world to do, or one of the easiest ones to do as long as you plan properly for it. So you can't expect him to give, like, you know, Ada copies out or something like that. That'd be crazy, right? Absolutely. Moving down to the shelter mission, this is probably the best shelter mission I can remember us having ever, which is a good thing. So if you're a newer player, this is a fantastic one for you guys. You're going to start out with a couple heroes that are just great for early game. One of those is Sigmund. This dude right here, if you guys don't know about Sigmund, A, what the crap's wrong with you? And B, what the crap's wrong with you? All right? Old Siggy, bang, he's amazing. Pretty much the best. When it comes to PvE damage, very solid in fighting bosses. He has some utility in the Aspen Dungeon as a node breaker, not a huge amount, but he's not terrible there either. Does not work very well in PvP at all. Not his jam. But he's very much a boss fighter, and he's very good at it. I have an E3 on this account. I absolutely love him to death. Great unit for that. Just all around, great for boss fighting. So it's a good one to pick up early game, especially on an early server, help you maximize that boss damage, get you into the top ranks, is good stuff. Moving over, we have Aiden. Aiden's been around for a long time, and, you know, I can forgive you for not knowing much about him because he's really, I don't know, he hasn't ever been, like, in the forefront, at least not since I've played. Like, there was a short time he popped up, like, an Aiden cheeses were really popular. It kind of died off, but there's been a resurgence. Some people still out there rocking Aiden cheeses and, like, ruin teams and stuff with, like, the 2 Abyss, the 2 Shadow, and the 2 Darks. So you still see him occasionally. Essentially what Aiden is he's kind of a nuke. You can't see it here at 5-star, so we'll check him out in the gallery here in a second. But he's kind of like a cheesy nuke. We'll talk about it in a second. By the way, if you guys don't know, for every single one of these guys, it's always going to be the same stuff. You need 4 of the class they are in the faction they are. So Aiden is a mage in the Shadow faction. You need 4 mage 4 stars, and then any 5-star will do, and you can snag out Aiden, but you also get the gear. The gear is probably the best part of the event. Same thing here for old Siggy. You need Fortress Warriors, and then any 5-star will do, and that's good. Moving over, we've got Vesa. If you don't know about Vesa, I don't know where you've been. She's been around for ages. Pokes people, it's great. But anyways, what she really is she was like the big healer for a long time until healers kind of got slapped with like the you suck now stick. And that's kind of where she's at. She's not really an in-game hero anymore. You don't see a lot of them in in-game lineups because healing really isn't that great when you get to E3s. Her heals don't scale well with massive health pools. So she kind of falls off in that range, but early to mid-game, you're not going to find a better healer unless you're very lucky and build a Belrain or something. She is fantastic for early game, dropping decent damage with her active skills, but also giving healing to your team, which is just fantastic and good news. A little bit of crowd control in early game PvP. Sometimes it saves your butt, sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of wishy-washy on that. But very solid early to mid-game unit, and a really great one to pick up from a shelter event because, I mean, come on now. You can't really go wrong with that early game. With that said, moving over, boop, 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 we've got Corinne. Corinne. The old Corinne. Corinne. You like that? I like that. Okay, so Corinne, like I said, all these heroes are kind of mid-tier, but honestly, they're some of the better mid-tiers, especially Sigmund and Vesa. Corinne's kind of in the boat where he used to be more prevalent. Nowadays, you don't really see him that much in the in-game because there's just better options out there. But he's still not a bad Aspen hero. The main reason he is, we'll talk about it when he hits 10-star, because at 5-star through 9-star, he's pretty lackluster. He doesn't really take off till 10-star plus, but he's a pretty decent Aspen hero with decent amount of boss damage. Not crazy amounts of boss damage, but pretty respectable amounts. But when it comes to PvP, he just gets nuked to death. He doesn't really hang there very well. But like I said, for an early to mid-game unit, he's not bad. You can get some serious ground made with him, up in the Aspen dungeon and stuff, and you can always swap them out later. It's not a big deal. With that said, we've got 2 heroes here that we haven't seen in a while in the shelter mission. We might have seen Asmo recently, I don't know. But usually it's Dark Arsenal and Gurki. Almost always that's what it is all the time. They're the only 2 that pop up here, and generally I say avoid them. Do not buy them. They're not worth it. And in this case, if you're trying to be competitive in PvP, they're still not worth it. If you're wanting really good boss damage, Dasmog's kind of worth it. Asmo, he's not in a good place right now. I'm just going to say it. He's pretty bad. You don't see Asmos in the top 20 in our arena. I couldn't find a single Asmodel. I found one Dasmog, so, points for him. But Asmo's kind of a dead unit now. He's just not really around, at least not on our servers or any server I play on. You don't see him. He's just not that great, so he's definitely not worth it in my book unless you just really are fiending for a light hero for Heroic Miracle. I wouldn't bother. But the reason these guys generally aren't worth buying is because the cost to reward ratio. So in this case, you get 1 copy of a hero, which, I guess that makes sense. But you got to spend 2 copies to get it, which we'll go ahead and do. We'll go ahead and, what we'll do? Yeah, we'll do it that way. All right, we're going to go ahead and do it. It's a bad idea, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm building Daddy Moog. I need him to get to E3 for funsies' sake. He's good for boss damage, and I want him. But just keep in mind, I would not recommend you do this unless you are dead set on building Dasmog, because it's not worth it. 2 5-star Dark Heroes is not worth trading for 1 unless it's like an Aspen. Maybe a Mim or Aspen. Other than that, don't do it. Don't even mess with it. And you're also throwing away 2,000 gems on top of that, which stings my pride, but let's get it done. We're back to peasant levels up there. Look at that. We're dirty peasant. Oh, sad face. And the same thing over here with Asmo. 2,000 gems and 2 light heroes. I'm not going to do it because I don't want him. But it's kind of a hefty cost for the unit itself. They need to make the pot a little sweeter, in my opinion. I would say if you want to make this a thing, throw 2-piece 5-star gear with them. I mean, why not? You get 2-piece 4-star gear over here for throwing away a 5.5-star hero. Over here, you throw away 2 5-star heroes and 2,000 gems, and you only get the hero copy. Like, I understand they want to make light and dark rare, but at this point, you're just making it ridiculous. Like, I wouldn't even have done that if it wasn't like my path to E3, because that Das Mode copy's E1. I can buy one up here for E2, and I can E3 as Das Mode pretty soon. Probably not this week. I'm a little short on food, but I can get him to like E1 or E2 if I really push it, and that's kind of cool. With that said, that's the shelter mission. We'll go and drop into the 10-star area to look at some stuff because that's kind of important. We talked about Old Kamath here. He can fly, pretty good stuff. But he's kind of a slower dude, but he's got a ton of crowd control. That's really what he's for, PvP crowd control. We've already talked about him before, pretty recently actually, so I'm not going to, hammer that one home. The main two we haven't talked about in any kind of recent talks is Aiden and Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Corinne, right? Pretty much. Those are the two we haven't talked about very much. So Aiden, look at that. I don't know what's wrong with me. Something, lots of things. But anyways, Aiden, the big thing that they kind of buffed on Aiden was this last passive. It's been a while back, but apparently when he dies, he drops 400% of his attack as damage against all enemies. And you're like, well, that's a pretty respectable death nuke. Well, it gets even more respectable. When your allies die, he gets more attack. So he actually can stack his attack quite high, and then when he dies, he does pretty nasty damage on death, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's the only unit in the game that kind of has that right now, like a big nukey death, which is kind of nice. But he has some reduced damage built into him, which is also handy for keeping him alive. A decent attack stat. He is very slow with no crowd control immunity whatsoever. So I'm not 100% sure how these guys are rocking Aiden cheeses in the end game, because I'm not really a big cheese guy. It's not my thing. Just isn't unless it's on a burger. I'm all down for a cheeseburger, you know what I'm saying? But anyways, not a huge amount of damage just right out the gate with him. I mean, a little bit, 150% attack against all enemies. He does silence warriors. Not a bad thing, especially against things like Aspen. Not necessarily a bad deal. But, I mean, it's not super great. He does gain some attack when he drops that as well. So he is, like I said, he's very vulnerable to being crowd controlled. But even if he does get crowd controlled the entire match, if he's your last guy up or one of your second to last guys up, he has a huge amount of attack kind of built in. And when he dies, he's going to drop a pretty nasty nuke on your enemies. So it's not a bad deal, and it kind of works out. Outside, every time I do that, I don't know. All right. I'm a child. Let's move over here. Was it Abyss? Corinne, yes. Corinne is Abyss. Had a stroke in my brain. Everybody calm down. Corinne. It's thing. So Corinne, like I said, he does not take off until 10-star, and the big reason behind that is his active skill. It's all right when he's at 6-star to 9-star, like does a little bit of damage. The big reason you want it 10-starred is because he's actually going to start healing himself for a percent of the damage he deals. That's good. It's good in a lot of ways because most of your heals in the game are based on attack. Some are based on percent HP, which are pretty powerful heals as well. But since Karim's not like a super tanky unit, he does heal based on damage he deals. Since he does start out with a decent crit rate, you can build him to have very high crit chance and crit damage. And when he drops those big nasty nukes with his active skill, he's also going to heal by a lot. So that's kind of where he kind of gets his Aspen utility. Is at 10-star plus, he gets a pretty solid amount of healing. I've had an E3 Corinne make it to Hell mode. I don't know how reliable that is. It's been a long time since I've done it. So, I mean, I would say he's probably still capable of reaching it. Probably. I don't know. I'd guarantee him probably Nightmare 50. But his basic attack also is going to heal him for percent of damage dealt, which again is nice. The biggest enemies you have to Corinne are things that drain his crit, because if he's not dropping critical hits, he's not scaling with that crit damage, and his heals really don't do much for him, and he can get nuked down very quickly. In early to mid-game PvP, as long as you're not fighting a bunch of Valkyries and such, when he kills enemy heroes, he gains attack, which is also pretty nice, because in like the very first parts of the game where everybody's dealing with like one E3 unit or one 10-star unit and the rest are kind of crap, Corinne kind of shines there because he can knock out the little guys one by one, get huge amounts of attack to fight the big guy, and he can nuke them down pretty hard. So not bad for early to mid game. When you start getting to the late game into things, He's just not very good. There's a lot of units that replace him and do a better job than he does. But like I said, a lot of the stuff in these shelter missions are early mid-game things. They're not super, important. But whatever. I guess we could touch on well, you know about Daddy Moog. I've got Daddy Moog. You'll hear about him this week, probably, maybe. Asmo, like I said, though, we've talked about him before. He looks cool. Back when I started playing the game, he was like the ad boy for Idle Heroes. Like, this was their, like, selling dude. He ran around spanking people. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But I never got one because he was a light hero, and it's whatever. But he's a very crit-based hero. All of his stuff kind of revolves around stacking critical marks on people, then triggering them with crits. And the good thing about Asmo is even though he does stack those crit marks on people, he doesn't have to be the one that procs them. So somebody else can actually drop a crit on your enemy and proc that crit mark for him anyway, so it's kind of nice. However, in the current meta with very high damage units, really nukey things like Aspen, Ada, and even Valkyrie, you're not going to see a lot of Asmo shining because he doesn't really do that much against people that are very nukey. He gets kind of nuked on. He's kind of nukey himself, but he's nowhere near on the levels of someone like Aspen, where round 2 he can just drop insane damage mixed with crowd control and stuff. It's not really a comparison. Especially when you're taking things like Ada. Oop, Ada. Everybody knows about Ada. She's running the game right now. So yeah, I mean, Asmo's just not very important. I wouldn't waste my resources on him. But that's pretty much everything about the event. Do I want to run it longer? Not really. I don't want to bug you guys. These events, like, we kind of get most of the stuff. If you're a newer player, you might not quite understand all the things about it, but trust me, you'll catch on. They're pretty easy. So instead of talking your ear off today about everything in detail, we're just going to leave it there. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please make sure, smash that thumbs up button and show your support. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe as well, and tell your friends about it, because that definitely helps me out a lot. And I will see you guys in the next one.